This is the YVESS Podcast. I call it the House of Living Essence. These conversations are an invitation to pause, to reflect, and perhaps to uncover something within yourself that has been quietly waiting beneath the noise. So today I'm going to talk about forgiveness. And this subtitle there is When It No Longer Matters. But it's not exactly what it sounds like. And if you listen to the podcast to the end, you will understand how forgiveness can no longer matter. Welcome. So as I say, I'm going to explore this. And this is one of the most misunderstood words in the human experience, I believe. Forgiveness, yes. And there's so much to learn about forgiveness, and people all over the world have their opinions about forgiveness, but if you think about it, it's a tough subject. Look at what's happening in the world today. Mostly about forgiveness or lack of forgiveness and greed. Have you ever noticed how often people say, you just need to forgive and move on. Forgive and move on. Do it for yourself. That's kind of true, but let's just go deeper into it. They say it as though forgiveness is simple. As though forgiveness means pretending it never happened. As though forgiveness means letting someone off the hook, right? Even as though forgiveness requires you become friends again. What if it requires you to become friends again, to trust again, or to continue allowing someone access to your life? Is that what forgiveness requires? I don't believe that's what forgiveness is at all. In fact, I think forgiveness has been misunderstood for so long that many people resist it, not because we are willing to heal, but because they believe that forgiveness somehow betrays the pain they experienced. That is the real no. If I forgive, doesn't that mean it was acceptable? Doesn't it mean they won? Doesn't that mean there are no consequences? I don't think so. I believe forgiveness is something entirely different. I believe forgiveness is one of the greatest acts of choosing yourself. Not choosing them, choosing you. One of the things I've learned is that pain has an extraordinary way of traveling. It moves quietly through families, through friendships, through marriages, through workplaces, and through generations. Someone who has been deeply wounded often wounds someone else. Not always intentionally, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes because they've never known anything different. We all have heard the expression, hurt people hurt people. Now, there is truth in that, but I think we need to be careful. Pain may explain behavior. It does not excuse it. Understanding why someone behaved the way they did is not the same as saying what they did was acceptable. It isn't. Some wounds change lives. Some betrayals alter the whole course of an entire family. Some words can echo, for decades. Acknowledging that reality is not bitterness, it is honesty. How many times have people said, oh, you bitter, holding on to that? No. Honesty is where healing begins. It's honesty. One of the greatest misconceptions about forgiveness is that it removes accountability. It doesn't. Forgiveness does not erase consequences. It never has. It never will. Every action has consequences. Every decision shapes future. The consequences of your actions still matter. They matter to the law. They matter to your relationships. They matter to your own journey of growth and accountability. But they no longer determine my future. I refuse to allow your choices to become the material from which I build my life. That's what you can say. That's how I view it. Justice and forgiveness are not opposites. Justice concerns consequences, and forgiveness concerns freedom. One belongs to the person who acted, consequences, and the other belongs to the person who chooses to heal. Perhaps that's why forgiveness feels so difficult, because we think we're giving someone else something. We think we're giving them off the hook, right? We imagine forgiveness as a gift handed to the offender. But perhaps we've been looking in the wrong direction all along. Perhaps forgiveness was never meant to be a gift for them. Maybe it's the greatest gift we can ever give ourselves. The moment I forgive, I'm not saying what you did was acceptable. I'm saying you no longer get to decide who I become. That is very different. A very, very different conversation. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. It does not require another conversation. It doesn't even require restored trust. It does not require another opportunity to be hurt. I can forgive you and still have healthy boundaries. I can forgive you and still choose not to trust you. I can forgive you and still allow the natural consequences of your choices to unfold. Those are not contradictions, they are wisdom. Forgiveness is not saying you may continue hurting me. Forgiveness is saying you no longer have access to my peace. There's another thought that fascinated me. It's the phrase we use so casually. It doesn't matter anymore. We usually mean that we no longer care, but perhaps there's another way to understand it. Matter is the substance from which the physical world is formed. Everything we touch has matter, and everything we touch and build requires and is matter. So perhaps when we finally say it doesn't matter anymore, we're saying something much deeper. We're not saying it never happened. We're not saying it never happened. And we're not saying there were no consequences. We are saying, I have decided not to keep giving this substance in my life. I refuse to let it become the material from which I build my future. I refuse. That changes everything, because now forgiveness isn't forgetting. Forgiveness is choosing what will and what will not become part of the architecture of your life. And this is where fragrance teaches something extraordinary. As many of you know, I work with natural perfume. Every day I have the privilege of blending materials gathered from flowers, from leaves and woods and bark and roots and resins, and nature has been one of my greatest teachers. When I compose a fragrance, I don't remove an ingredient because it has a darker character. Vetiver has an earthiness. Myrrh has a solemn depth. Cedarwood has quiet strength. Patchouli carries richness. Without them, many perfumes would be beautiful for just a fleeting moment. but they would have no foundation. Life is remarkably similar. I would never wish suffering on anyone. The pain was never the gift. The betrayal was never the gift. And the loss was never the gift. The lesson was the gift. The wisdom that emerged, the compassion that deepened, the strength that quietly developed. Once the lesson has become part of who you are, you no longer need to carry the pain itself. There's something else that fragrance reminds me of. Every perfume evolves. No fragrance smells the same from beginning to end. The sparkling citrus note introduces the story. The heart reveals its character. The base remains long after everything has faded. Wouldn't it be tragic if we insisted that our lives should remain forever in the top notes of our greatest pain? Wouldn't it be tragic? Nature doesn't work that way. Perfume doesn't work that way. Neither do we. Healing is the gradual unfolding of a new accord. When I compose a perfume, every ingredient remains true to itself. Rose never tries to become cedarwood. Frankincense never competes with bergamot. Sandalwood never apologizes for not being jasmine. Each ingredient contributes its own unique character, and together something entirely new is born. Forgiveness, I believe, is much the same. It doesn't erase those difficult notes. It doesn't pretend they were never there. It simply stops allowing one ingredient to dominate the entire composition. Perhaps that's true of our lives too. You are not the worst thing that happened to you. That experience is one note in your composition. It's not the whole fragrance. Choosing yourself is not selfish. In many ways, it's one of the most responsible things you can do. Because pain that is never healed rarely stays with one person. It often finds another place to live. It appears in our words, our reactions, our parenting, even our friendships, our leadership, our communities. Until one person quietly decides, it stops here. Not because what happened was acceptable, not because justice no longer matters, not because consequences disappear. It's because someone finally chooses not to pass the wound on. Perhaps forgiveness is one of the ways we say, this ends with me. So perhaps forgiveness isn't really about the other person at all. Perhaps forgiveness is about reclaiming authorship of your own life. Your consequences are yours. My future is mine. Forgiveness is the moment I stop confusing the two. Because forgiveness isn't choosing you. Forgiveness is choosing me. Perhaps that's what we really mean when we say it doesn't matter anymore. We don't mean it never happened. We don't mean there were no consequences. We simply mean I have chosen not to give it any more substance in my life. I refuse to let it become the material from which I build my future. Perhaps forgiveness is the only its own fragrant journey. Not because the past disappeared, not because justice disappeared, not even because consequences disappeared, but because somewhere along the way you discover that your future has a fragrance of its own, a fragrance no longer blended from bitterness, but from wisdom, no longer composed from resentment, but from freedom, no longer carrying the scent of survival, but quietly revealing that unmistakable aroma of becoming yourself. This is a passionate subject for me because it carries so much into the world today. Hopefully more people can put that down and move forward without allowing the betrayal, trust, pain, and everything dictate their future. This is your fragrant journey. This is the YVESS podcast in the House of Living Essence. Until next time, breathe deeply, live authentically, and allow your life to become a fragrance that reflects who you truly are.